everybody. Welcome to Sasquatch Out of the Shadows Live. It is now 2022. Kind of hard to believe, but we are here in the new year. Hope everyone had a wonderful New Year's. And again, welcome to 2022. This is the first show of the year here. We're very excited about that. Going to be a great show for folks that are new or maybe watching this after the fact. So this is a weekly live stream that we do every night, that would be crazy, every Monday night at 8 p.m. Eastern, talking about Sasquatch, cryptids, other stuff, mostly Bigfoot, but we do venture into some occasional other topics, which is awesome. So we're really excited for tonight's show, and I will announce that guest in a moment. If you haven't seen previous episodes, this has got to be stream 86 or 87 at this point, so we're almost in the 90s, which is pretty wild. I did not think I'd be doing a weekly live stream for that long. But obviously, thanks to everyone who watches and tunes in. A lot of great viewers and lots of great people in the audience. And love to see everyone in the chat. So last week, we had an awesome discussion with Tate Hieronymus and Jonathan Easley, talking about some possible Sasquatch thermal footage from Southern California that Tate got. You know, a lot of people said, oh, it's nothing but blob squatch. Yeah, I agree. I was pretty skeptical, obviously, but I think it's the extenuating circumstances surrounding the footage that's why we brought Jonathan on and Tate as well to discuss about what was going on. You know, and I still don't really know either way, but I think it's an interesting discussion. And the whole point of the discussion was to talk about, you know, scrutinize the claims, right? And have the ability and the willingness to talk about footage. I mean, it's one thing to make a bold claim unless you want to be poked and prodded. You know, you have to be able to be willing to discuss your potential evidence and, you know, have it looked at by others. So I think I respect Tate obviously for that. And it's an interesting show. Just go check it out. Enough about that. Next week, we'll be joined by Emily Fleur of the Forest Fleur podcast. Really excited. Emily's awesome. She's been doing a bunch of stuff out in the Pacific Northwest recently. For folks that are aware of her, she does a great podcast, talks to a lot of awesome researchers. So we're really excited for that show. But on to tonight's show, we will be talking to Shelly Covington-Montana, and I will be reading her bio in a moment. Do just want to remind folks, go check out the latest Beyond the Trail episode, The Monster of Minerva. It's out over on the Small Town Monsters channel, been out for about 2 weeks now. I just put out a new video as well on this channel this past Thursday. So if you want to see content that's not live stream related, there's plenty of other videos that we're working on, and we've got a lot of plans for 2022, and we'll be talking about that in the next few weeks. But on to tonight's guest. We are joined by Shelly Covington-Montana. So Shelly is native of Texas, and she is known as a wilderness and wildlife enthusiast with a passion for conservation and preservation. Her search for the truth has committed her to constantly improving her education through the citizen sciences. I like that. Consistently pushing oneself to learn in the field of wildlife behavior and conservation. These commitments can only increase my ability to bring forth solid evidence by separating factual research from emotional-based research. Facts are truth, and I'm hoping with proper wildlife DNA collection and analysis, it could benefit and be a standard in the search for the enigma we call Sasquatch, end quote. And that's a direct quote from Shelly. So Shelly is a level 3 certified wildlife tracker. She's doing constant work on citizen science wildlife DNA kits. As of late, she's doing research on the term Sasquatch Alba Vernix, and we'll talk about that. I've had Doug Highcheck on the show talking about that in the past a little bit, so it'll be great to expand on that. Then that's also part of the Sasquatch Alba Vernix DNA and Latent print kit. So really excited. And without further ado, let's just bring Shelly right on in. How are you doing, Shelly?
How are you?
Good. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me. I'm very humbled to be in the presence of a lot of great researchers who you have interviewed.
Yeah, there's so many great people in this community, and I appreciate you coming on as my first guest of 2022 as well, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you too.
Thank you. So right kind of out the gate, let's just get it out of the way. You know, what sparked the interest in Sasquatch? Where did that fascination for you come from?
Well, my husband, and I'll try to make this as short as I can. So I've been married now 36 years, and I've known my husband for over 40 years. And he had just told me about this story all through our lives after we got married. You know, it would just come up when we were watching TV on a Sunday or whatever. And he talked about going hunting in East Texas, where he was meeting up with a friend of his that I know, and but his friend wasn't going to show up until the next day, and this is back in the 80s, in like 83, I believe. And it's when, everybody had the Bigfoot four-wheel drives, the giant four-wheel drives, and you could go off in the national forest and nobody would bother you off trail. I mean, you literally could drive through the forest off road. And I think it was about a mile off road that him and his friend had found a place where they liked to hunt. And anyway, he had gone out on, I'm assuming, a Friday night. His friend was going to meet him the next day. And he says that he had put his tailgate down, built a fire, and was camping underneath his tailgate. And something apparently was circling his camp and breaking large trees. And at first he thought it was possibly a cow, or, I mean, there's just nothing in Texas that, you can think of that is big enough to do that. And
Right.
So he kept telling this story over and over and over for about 25 years, I guess, or something like that. Yeah. And I couldn't figure out what he was talking about. He would never say it was Bigfoot or he thought it was Bigfoot. But he said this thing circled his camp and then it came around the second time. And the second time it came around, he jumps up and runs over his fire, gets in his truck, runs over the fire, and goes into town and sleeps at the gas station.
Wow.
It mortified him. And, after a while, and I think it was right when Finding Bigfoot probably came out or something, when Bigfoot started becoming popular on the internet.
Yep.
Or on TV. I don't know. I just remember one day just looking at him and saying, "Are you talking about Bigfoot? Is that what happened?" And he says, "I didn't want you to think I was crazy." And I
Wow.
knew right then, because I'd known him all my life, that he wasn't lying. He's never lied to me. People that know us know that we have this extremely great marriage, and he is the reason I get to do what I get to do. And so I just went on this journey. First, it was just delving into the internet for a couple of years, and then, being brave enough to get on Facebook Bigfoot sites. And I didn't really talk to people about Bigfoot. I really talked more about wildlife behavior, because I was recognizing when things were misinterpreted, I guess, a little
Right.
bit. And then that's how I became friends with Shane Corson, who asked me to be a co-host for a show. And so that's how it started.
That is so cool. I like that story. Now, it's so interesting, and that's one of my favorite things about, kind of just first talking to someone that's into this subject, how they got into it. There's always the people in the camp that are either they just had an interest since they were young. Maybe they saw the Patterson Gimlin film or the shows. That's kind of how I got into it. And there's plenty of people that got into it for those reasons, which is fine. But then there's those that got into it because they had a personal experience, or even rarer, somebody they know had a personal experience like you, and that's what led them into it. I mean, a few shows ago, I had on a witness from Washington State, Jay Birch, for folks in the audience, 2 or 3 shows ago, and he talked about his encounter that he had. And I've talked to his wife as well, and I think he's actually in the chat right now. That's Bigfoot Barbecue and Camp Cookbook. Hey, Jay, I was just mentioning you, and how his wife she at first didn't really know how to feel, and trusted him because they had that bond. So when your husband, he told you, did he tell you the full story in the past, or was it bits and pieces? And was that like the reveal when you heard about it when you were talking about
over and over? He just never said he never actually saw the creature, and he actually had another encounter with other people, because he was a coyote hunter, back in the day. And so him and his buddies, which I knew them all, would go out and spotlight for coyotes, which you can do that in Texas. And they had this encounter. I think it was a year or two later. I don't recall. And let me make something clear. Stories are stories, right? I mean, even my encounter, I don't expect anybody to believe because it's a story. I don't have any proof of it.
Sure.
But I believe my husband. He's the one person in this world I believe. And anyway, his friends actually saw something at the base of a meadow. Like they're looking down an incline into a meadow, looking for coyotes, and they see this large entity under a giant oak tree at the edge of the meadow where the tree line starts. And they're spotlighting and they can see a figure, but they can't figure out what it is. And this happened after the fact. And he told me both of these stories. And it just didn't register with me because, I watched the Patterson-Gimlin film. I remember it very vividly. I think so it came out in 1967. So that would be, I was like 4 or 5 years old. And yeah, I was born in 1963. So I remember watching that. I remember my mom was actually sewing an outfit on a sewing machine and watching that and thinking, wow, that's cool. But that's in the Pacific Northwest. Who would think Texas would have Bigfoot, or Sasquatch? And so him telling me these two specific stories that were very, they meant something to him, and because he told them to me over and over, and he didn't tell anybody else. Like, I never saw him talk about it other than just me and him. He didn't talk to our children about it. He didn't talk to his friends about it. But I remember the second story. All the guys he actually saw eyes. They saw glowing eyes, and they saw this large figure that was looking over a branch. And then it would look around the tree, like this. It would look up and down, and they wanted to shoot it. And he was like, no, you can't shoot it. You can't identify it. You can't shoot it. But yeah, he told me everything, but he never really saw it. I guess the first encounter, he went back with his friend and they found a lot of torn up tree breaks and such. But what does that prove?
Right. Well, but it's just interesting. I mean, the fact that you trust him and you believe him. I mean, there's a lot of us that are into this subject, whether it's passively or had an encounter that I've heard some stories of spouses or significant others not believing the person, and I think it's unfortunate. But for those of us that do have girlfriends or spouses or whatever that are supportive, that's awesome, and it means a lot. So I'm assuming that probably means a lot to your husband, and I just do find it interesting that you took up the mantle of doing the research. I think that's really cool. That's pretty awesome. And
he is, well, so I think about a year or two into, I hadn't even got on the internet, as far as talking to people, but I was doing, research in the sense of just delving into watching videos, and because I wanted to know everything, oh my gosh, I know my husband's not lying. What's going on? And I made him go back, and I took him back, and he put like 4 guns on him, and he was not happy. And he keeps telling me, be careful what you wish for, you might get it. And so he understands my drive and how I feel about it, but he has really no interest in it. He's like, I know what's in the woods. I don't need to go look for it. It's really interesting because he trusts me, he worries about me. Sure. But I do most of my work. I mean, of course, I meet up with people, but I get in my truck and, leave in May or June and head out for 4 months to the Pacific Northwest by myself. But he is a fantastic support system. Like people don't realize how much goes into traveling for that long on your own. He takes care of everything because I don't always have internet access, and
Right, of course.
so he handles all of my needs outside of that. And that includes, sending me things I need, every month and things like that. So he's great.
That is awesome. I mean, it sounds like a great situation for you both, and I'm really excited to talk about, some of those encounters that you've had in the Pacific Northwest. We'll jump into that. I do just want to say hey to everyone in the chat. We obviously have a lot of cool people in the chat.
Yes, we
Scottish
do.
Wildman, what is up? SoCal Squatch says, "What's up, party people?" Hey Todd, how's it going, man?
Hey,
we've got
Todd, I know you're there.
we got Texas Bigfoot Rangers says
That's
here.
my buddy Michael.
Oh,
Michael
awesome.
Waldry.
How you doing, Michael? We've got Lisa Johnston in Johnston. Yep, Jen. I can't read today, apparently. Johnston. What's going on? We have My Eyes. What is going on? Kevin Hamilton. Hey. Upper Canada Sasquatch. Tate Hieronymus says, hello, my smelly friends.
Hi,
I don't know.
Tate.
I think that may just be you, Tate. You may want to
I
lay off
met
the
Tate a few
PBR.
years ago.
Tate's a character. We'll put it that way. As
Mhm.
Kevin says, Tate, you survived the New Year's. Good for you. JD Sedona, howdy y'all. Glenn H, what is going on? Francesca E, happy New Year's, Alex. Hats off to Tate. Tate's just always stealing my shows. He's stealing all the shows. He was on last week's show. Give it a rest, Tate. No, just kidding. We love Tate. Obviously, I said hey to Jay. We were talking about him and his encounter earlier. Donald Fuller says, seems strange to have Alex on two different podcasts. Oh, okay. So yeah, people are confused about that. I'm currently live on another show called Pine Island Research with Jeff Harding. We pre-recorded that so he could air it live because he does his show Monday nights at 8 p.m. as well. So it may look confusing for people that are like, how is it possible that I'm on live on both places at once? That one's pre-recorded. Jeff's awesome. We had a great conversation, but just the timing and everything, how it lined up, that's how it happened. Sandra Piper, how's it going as well? And we've got Nikki of Harry Man Hoaxes and Hoodwinks. Hey there, we had an awesome show yesterday talking about Tom Biscardi with Steve Culls. I got to learn so much about Steve's insight into the hoaxes and stuff that he's been involved with, and it was awesome to be kind of a fly on the wall listening to Steve talk about all that. So check out what Nikki does as well.
I met Steve Culls at the Texas Bigfoot Conference. He was the speaker there. Yeah, it was really cool.
Yeah, Steve's great. He's one of the greatest here in the Northeast for sure. Mm-hmm. But yeah, awesome to have everyone in the chat as always. Off to a great 2022 so far with the chat and everything. So yeah, jumping right into it. You had mentioned to me, your work in the Pacific Northwest. That's where you had two encounters and you had audio and that sort of stuff. So if you want to just start talking about, what kind of led up to those events, the floor is yours.
Yeah. So it all started in 2015, July 31st, August 1st. Well, maybe a day before that. I had already been to the Pacific Northwest I think I was there for 3 or 4 weeks. And at the time I was flying in, and Shane Corson would drop me off in areas I wanted to be in, and then come back and pick me up, or Chris Spencer, or
awesome.
People would help me out. And so in 2015, I was really wanting to meet this gentleman by the name of Kurt Brandenburg, who is just a phenomenal researcher. And I really wanted to meet him. And another gentleman here in Texas was able to set up a 2-week expedition with him, myself, this gentleman, Kirk, Nathaniel Bronis, and I think Shane showed up, and Chris probably showed up, and various people from the Olympic Project, because I'd already met the Olympic Project people, and I believe, gosh, it's been so long ago. I think I was part of it at the time, or just became a part of the Olympic Project. But anyway, I wanted to meet Kurt Brandenburg really bad because I really respected his work. And so I flew home and then jumped in a vehicle 2 days later and drove straight back
Oh, wow.
for this 2-week adventure. I needed to see my family.
Sure,
At
of
the
course.
time, I wasn't carrying an inReach, which is a satellite phone.
Oh, yeah. Which one do
So
you have, by the way?
I
I
had the
mean,
inReach
oh, the InReach, like the
Explorer.
okay,
Mhm,
the Explorer. I'm
mhm.
actually thinking about getting one. I was just talking
It's
about this the other day.
number one piece of equipment I own. Number
I
one.
know. Yeah, I was literally
Number one.
last week trying to get one, but they're sold out pretty much everywhere.
Gotcha.
Because I've used the minis before and that sort of stuff, and I
Mhm.
just want to kind of upgrade to something that has a little bit more of the map capabilities. But
Oh, yeah,
not to
and
derail your story, but
you can go download all the maps on the Explorer. I've owned 2 of them because, well, actually, I ran over one with my four-wheeler. But anyway, so we drive back, um, and we meet with Kirk, who takes us to a location where there's some historical Bigfoot stuff going on, or has, in the past. I don't think he really thought anything would happen. But practically the day we got there, um, there's a ridge line that it's a 10-mile hike to these cliffs. At the base of the cliffs, there is old camps, old mining camps, is old copper mining camps. And then there's a forestry road. And then where we camped was a quarter mile into an area that is another quarter mile from the headwaters of a lake. So we get there, and I think it's about dusk. And honestly, I mean, I, I, I talk about my encounters a little bit, but let's be real clear. I'm a human, and unless I'm reading off my notes, which I don't do, it it could vary. I mean,
right.
you know what I mean? Like we always assume that something happened when, if you go back, it wasn't quite that. So,
Yeah,
but
we can change things the way we remember things. We're
yes,
we're horrible at remembering things
very
exactly how they happened.
very horrible at remembering and very horrible at determining distance,
That's yeah,
especially in environments we're not familiar with.
right.
So anyway, but long story short, at the top of this ridge at dusk, and now I'm really good at muscle memory activity, which number one thing is jump out of my vehicle, put out recorder. Just do it. Just get really good at it. And I'd gotten really good at that. So first thing I do is jump out, introduce, and then run over and put out a recorder. Well, dusk comes around. I think we had gotten there to like at 6, and then at this time of year it gets dark like at 9 o'clock. And around dusk, all of a sudden I hear this loud, like, pow, like a home run or a gunshot sound off the top of this cliff, which is a 10-mile hike. There's hiking trails. There's 10, and it's 10 miles. And I'm like, hey, was that a gunshot? And they're like, oh, maybe so. I don't know. There was 5 of us there. Kirk, Nathaniel, myself, the other gentleman from Texas, and another gentleman, maybe 6. I don't remember. But anyway, as the night goes on, there's these loud pow, knocks coming, or shotgun. I don't know. I'm thinking they're gunshots coming off
Right.
of this ridge line, but they're working their way down. Um, and this is the first night, and throughout the night, we're getting these loud, huge knock. I sent you audio, which
Yes, I've listened to it. Yeah, and I gotta say, it's super similar to some of the stuff I've heard out there.
yeah,
That again, it's either a gunshot or it's not. I mean,
right.
it's tough for it not to be. I mean, especially at some of the distances you hear it at, and um, that was definitely interesting. I wasn't able to download it. Otherwise, we could play it. I could
Oh,
try
dang.
here. I suppose I could see.
Well, that's
Little
okay. I
background.
mean, but the thing was for me, and I'm telling myself this is stupid. I go to look for Bigfoot and he's here. I mean, I'm just not believing it. And so the first night, the thing is that's important here is that it's working its way towards our camp.
Right.
It's coming towards us. So the audio I sent you, the first night, everybody's kind of like, yeah. Well, the second night, we're like, wait, that maybe that was wood knocks. I mean, and Kirk even says he thought it was a weather phenomenon. It wasn't. It was
Mm.
too clear and too like it worked its way to our camp. Um, and I can't remember. I've got to go back into my notes, but the guys go out, Nathaniel and Kirk and another gentleman, the guy that came from Texas, go out on a row walk, and we have radios. And me and another gentleman are sitting at camp, and all of a sudden I hear this pow, right in front of me in the tree line. And I called the guys. I'm like, hey, was that you guys? And they were like, no, we thought it was you.
Hmm.
Well, it's in between us.
Right.
So the next night we decide, okay, now let's get our shit together, And so we put everybody to bed, but myself and Nathaniel Bronis, who at the time, I mean, he's a younger man, so his body stature is smaller than the other three guys. They're older, the kind of buffier, bigger, and we have a cold camp because this is during a burn ban.
Yeah. Right.
And so we have cold camp.
Ooh.
Ooh,
So
there he is.
this is the video you sent me. Now I'm
Okay, now this is the second encounter 6
okay.
days later in the exact same
All
spot.
right. I'll save that for later then.
Yeah. And you can, put up the link for people to listen to it, but
Yeah, I'll put that in the that'll be in the description of this video, guys. So that'll be
okay.
something you can click on and watch afterwards, or even
Yeah.
now if you'd like to, whatever works.
But anyway, so Nathaniel and I sit in a cold camp, all the guys get in their tents, and we just start mimicking the Sierra sounds. We're just acting goofy and in the dark. But what is really interesting is that it's a blue moon. It's the second full moon. It's July 31st, August 1st. And here we go, like clockwork. Those same big gunshot kind of knocks start at the top of that ridge and start working their way down. And they're working themselves towards us. But what's super interesting is there's an elk meadow to the right of camp. And in that elk meadow, there's another knock that's stationary. It's not moving, and it's a passive knock. So this one that's coming down and towards us is really aggressive. Like it I feel like this is a big guy, just but this one down here would answer that one within a 10-minute window, I think, most of the time. And it was passive. Like I felt like they were saying they're not moving. They don't care. Because we pretended we didn't notice what was going on. We were just acting silly and loud and going, oh, and just pretending that just mimicking the Sierra sounds. And but what was super interesting. So from across the road, now there was another encounter years ago with Bart Catino where he thermed a Bigfoot, but at the time those thermals did not record.
Oh, I think I've heard this story.
Okay. It was directly across the road, called California Camp. from where we were. So it was about a quarter of a mile. But you could go through the woods through this. There was an old logging road there that had downed trees that nobody used anymore, and go kind of the back way through to our camp. Now, when you got to our camp, there was a burnout tree that was like leaning like this, and then there was another lodgepole pine standing there. Now remember, this is on the night of a blue moon, so it's a full moon. So we don't need light. We can see. All of a sudden, there was a tree knock at near this burnout log that was still standing, and the birds flew out of the tree. This is like at 2 a.m. Now, with my thermal work, what I'm doing now, I've done a lot of experimenting with thermal. And one of the things I've learned, so how many times have we walked through the woods at night? The birds don't leave. We make all kinds of noise. They aren't flying away. I have seen birds sitting in trees and not knowing what they were. Like they look like little squares, right? So I get out of my vehicle or walk up on them, and I actually throw stuff at it to see what it is, see if it's a rat or a squirrel, whatever, or a bird, and they don't move unless you hit the tree. They need to feel the vibration, not the noise. They don't need to hear, they need to feel to make them fly away and move. So at that moment, when all those birds flew over my camp from that tree, I could see what tree they came out of. I knew he hit that tree. That sticks in my mind.
Right.
So
yeah,
then
I've been trying to download it. I from the message that you sent me, I'm unable to download that particular audio, but I do have the other audio that will play when you talk about those other ones that happened.
Well, I'll try to send it again and maybe some kind of other format.
Yeah, I don't know what's up with Messenger. It's just kind of weird. It's not letting me. Usually it has the option to download a file, but I don't know why it's not doing it now.
Gotcha.
Kind of strange.
But so it actually moves into the tree line, and it's making all kinds of noise. Like, I mean, breaking stuff, and we literally are watching it, through the noise. We can't see it, but we can literally watch the noise, is how I explain it, if that makes sense. And then if you're listening to the audio, you hear this completely different sound other than, wood on wood or rock on wood or rock on rock. Right. But you hear a pop like that, but one single one. And then it walks out. Like, I see its silhouette, and I see it 3 times walking through the trees. And it's not like walking, it's gliding through the trees. And I remember just saying, what the F is that? And Nathaniel says he looks at my hat and focuses on the direction. And so I see it go 3 times, and I actually drew it. So I guess I should send that picture, but he sees it, or I see it 3 times. And then Nathaniel sees the end of it as it turns, and he can see like the light through the arm and the head as it goes down towards the other one. Remember I talked about the other one doing these little passive knocks? When you're listening to the audio that I sent you, that 1 minute audio, you hear these pow.
Yeah, you hear it in the distance, and you'll hear something a lot closer. Yep, I know what you're talking about.
Right. Well, the pow is the one coming towards us, and the little is the one over here just hanging out in the elk meadow. And then nothing. Dawn. And I'm upset. I'm like, this is dumb. I just came here to find Bigfoot and he showed up. Nobody's gonna believe me. This is stupid. I think they said I cried all day the next day, and then we did measurements and such and tried to make sure, I mean, your first reaction for me was to make sure it wasn't something else,
Of
elk
course,
or
yeah.
whatever. I think the second day after, or the night after, Nathaniel did these crazy calls of an encounter him and Kirk had. And we have audio of tree pushovers on that cliff. Like, ba-boom, 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 just crazy, but I don't know what that was. And then we leave. We travel around because remember, I got 2 weeks to spend with him. And we decide to come back 6 days later. And I wake up right before daybreak, and that audio, that video, the YouTube video I sent you.
Yep.
That's exact same spot. Though I moved my tent from the tree line, which I had to go sleep in that tent in the tree line all by myself, with my 45. And I wasn't doing that again. I was sleeping between the guys where Nathaniel and I had sat, and woke up to those rocks and pieces of tree branches and stuff hitting that tree right next to my tent. And so that's that. And but I don't expect anybody to believe anything. I mean, it's just a story that happened to me. So.
Right. And I think that's so common with the subject. I've had experiences like that where, you know what happened. I mean, the chances that it was somebody else, another human there, everyone's in a camp, they're armed pretty much. People usually don't do stuff like that and mess with others, but it's so frustrating. I mean, I've had so many times where I've heard knocks and these sorts of things that have happened. We've gotten an audio or whatever. And that's all it really is you may even have the audio, but again, it's still just a story. And that's, I think, what, you have these little experiences that are sort of tantalizing. They kind of lead you to want to keep going, but there's often nothing tangible there. So
right.
we'll definitely play that audio. I do just want to read this comment from Jay, who was mentioning earlier. He says, I sent Shelly a bunch of sounds that Tristan sent me earlier in the year. It's in the same area. So
Jay's had some experiences there I know of. I mean,
right.
We haven't gotten to actually visit, but no, the area where I had my encounter there's a plethora of encounters that happened there. I was talking about the Bart Catino encounter.
Yep, I've heard that one. I've heard Shane talking about some other ones that he's told us as well.
And the thing was, Shane found a footprint. I didn't send you that. And I was like, where? And he was like, oh, I'm sorry. And I was like, oh my God, we could have casted it, but it's silica based area.
Yeah.
But the thing for me, so I wouldn't listen to any of the audio for like 6 months. I hated it. I thought I was so mad, because I had no proof.
Yeah.
I know a little bit about wildlife behavior, and I couldn't put anything on this, so it really upset me because I had no proof. And I really didn't talk about the encounter itself publicly for, I think, 4 years, something like that. And finally, Kirk put on his website that YouTube channel, because Kirk
studies Sasquatch.
Yes. Yep. And it's a great YouTube channel. And when Kurt, it was so funny because when I was laying there in my tent on the second encounter, when we came back 6 days later, and I'm hearing these things hit that tree and they're boom, 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 boom. I can feel them bouncing on the ground through my sleeping pad.
Yeah.
This is why I don't sleep on the ground anymore. This is why I got a rooftop tent, and now I sleep in the back of my truck because I wore out the rooftop tent. But it was really, really, really intimidating and scary. I could not move because I couldn't tell if these things were standing next to the tree or, 50 yards away. It was horrifying for me. So when I got home, I couldn't talk about them publicly or listen to the audio. I guess for 6 months I wouldn't listen to the audio because I had convinced myself this was BS. My encounter, not Sasquatch, but just
Right.
what happened to me. I was
You were still
falling
trying
in.
to rationalize it somehow, right? I mean, your mind was trying to do that.
Yeah, and I didn't want to be that person that was like everything is Bigfoot because that
Of
is
course.
everything I'm not. I mean, a lot of people don't really care for me because I don't justify everything that happens to them. I question it.
And
And
honestly, that's refreshing. There is so
and
much of that in this field where everything becomes Bigfoot, and it dilutes the
yeah.
actual research. I think that's or people that are having the experiences when everything becomes Bigfoot. So that's definitely a breath of fresh air. And I know there's a lot of folks now that are pushing for that sort of really critical of big claims because not everything's Bigfoot.
Yeah, it is. Most things are not Bigfoot.
Right.
I mean, I feel very fortunate to have had anything happen to me because I don't think anything else will ever happen to me. I mean, um, if you're having if you're able to be a content creator on social media through the Bigfoot community, as far as having activity, you're probably not.
Right.
I'm just that's just me, and people don't want to hear it, and I'm sorry, but I think Sasquatch deserves better and the research deserves better. And I think we're failing.
Yeah.
If you think I'm going to ask other Bigfooters what they think about evidence, that's silly. Why wouldn't I go to a wildlife expert or a biologist I mean, yes, I will ask some of my friends who I trust, but
Yeah.
I
Of
don't need
course.
just one. I need like 5 of them to all agree on the same thing. I mean,
Oh, totally.
it
Well,
doesn't
that's the
make
thing. I mean, you do want to talk to folks that are in this field, like you said, folks that you trust that can just say, "Hey, just have a listen." And I do this all the time. And I was talking to you about, I think even before the show with Chris Spencer, I send him whenever I get stuff. I always send him stuff. I really trust his opinion. And there's other folks that you can talk to. Just say, "Hey, what is this? Am I just like wanting to think this is Bigfoot, or am I just missing something here?" But I think that it's the extra step of going and talking to folks that are not in Bigfoot. And there's so many examples, even recently, that we could go to of alleged Bigfoot videos and that sort of stuff that you would show a wildlife biologist who could clearly tell you what it is that's not a Bigfoot. I mean, we're talking about porcupines. That's been a theme a lot lately with certain people. But
well,
yeah, it's so that's just a really great thing to hear. I mean, we need more of
well,
that.
that's why I got my uh, wildlife tracker certification. Like,
Yeah.
because I was going. The thing was, excuse me. The thing was, so when I first went to the Pacific Northwest, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to learn so much from these wilderness people because, I live in Texas, and Texas is a huge state,
Yeah.
huge state. We have 60 million acres of pine forests, but we got a shit ton of people. And we don't have the BLM. We don't have we don't have the wilderness that the Pacific Northwest has.
Definitely not.
90% of Texas is privately owned. So you can't, if you're going Sasquatching in Oklahoma, Texas area, everybody's in the same place. you know.
Right. You have certain areas, yeah, like East Texas obviously is known
Right.
for that. You're talking about that earlier. The Big
It,
Thicket, that sort of area, yeah.
it's just congregated with so many people.
Right.
So, and you don't have the so like my equipment that I use and carry with me is not the equipment that most people carry in Texas, because we don't have those severe long winters and such, or rains. You know, I mean, we do, but it's different. It's just different. So, but doing research in Texas is not the same as doing research in the Pacific Northwest, because you've got wilderness actually out there. And I believe that the Pacific Northwest specifically is the birthplace of the Sasquatch, or Canada, Alaska, those regions. Here we are crushed together. And
Mm,
I mean, I know that Texas and Oklahoma have a lot of sightings, but we have a lot of people. We have a lot of
right.
people. You know, if you look at Washington State, Dallas Fort Worth Metroplex has almost as many people in the Dallas Fort Worth Metroplex as the whole state of Washington.
Yeah, which is such a massive area.
It's massive. I mean, we're our own ecosystem. Like, our weather is completely different from everybody else's because
Oh
we have
yeah.
so much concrete, you know? So I mean, we're like New York. And so for me, research I don't think people understand also that these things are different in different regions, because they have to be,
Yeah,
right?
it's the only way it would make sense. I mean, if you look at those environments like you're talking about, East Texas, that's similar to the swamps of Louisiana and into that whole
A
area,
little
right?
bit.
There's some areas, like Caddo Lake, something like that.
Yeah.
So that how is that at all similar to, the area around Mount Rainier, right? Completely different.
Yes. And
The
when
Rocky
people
Mountains, whatever. Yeah.
absolutely, and when people say, "Oh, it's squatchy here," I'm like, "What do you mean? Why do you say that? What is squatchy about East Texas versus Mount Rainier?" You know, I mean, because they're totally different.
Right.
What are you saying? You know, I don't quite get that term. But I don't get a lot of terms. I'm perplexed by people's assumptions of what is or isn't Bigfoot, because I was talking to my husband right before I got on the show about how bad we really are at depth perception and distance. You know, when you hear somebody say it was 8 foot tall or it was 50 feet away, I'm like, who's good at that? Well,
It's very difficult.
it's very difficult when you're not in a place that has a standard. So
Yeah.
if you're in a forest, there's no standard there, right? And um though when I think about it, I was in high school, I was in drill team. So everything was by the yard line on the football field. And so I've got a good idea, but that's on a football field, or that's in my house. Um,
You have something to compare it to. That's what we always stress
right.
about the importance of putting scale objects whenever taking photos of alleged tracks. And people never do that. And just put a dollar bill next to it. That's like
Yes.
at minimum, do something like that. But yeah, I think it's one thing I've noticed, and this is not really Bigfoot related, but I'm interested in the phenomenon of the eastern mountain lions and the
Mhm.
cougars and these sorts of things coming eastward, which I think is happening to some extent. And but what you'll see in a lot of these groups, and this is the same thing that happens in the Bigfoot, Facebook groups or whatever community pages that people have, the millions of groups, the hundreds of groups out there, where they'll post something that says, "Oh man, looks like a mountain lion. It's clearly a house cat or a bobcat," but and then people will say, "Oh, it was humongous," and you can see on the trail camera it was so tiny. And I think that goes to that depth perception thing. You're seeing in the woods, it's moving quickly. It might be
Mhm.
hard if you're not getting a really concrete look at it. It can be very tough to judge the distance like that. And And we're not the greatest of witnesses, unfortunately, as we've been talking about pretty much consistently
Well,
throughout
I
the
mean,
show.
this is a perfect example. Do you know how long the stripe is on the highway? You know how you got striped?
This is actually, yeah, a friend of mine told me those are about 6 to 7 feet long, if I'm not mistaken. Even longer.
A lot
10,
longer,
10 feet.
10 feet
10 feet, yeah.
and 20 feet in between. No, 30 feet. And a lot longer than we know, right?
Yeah.
And the reason I say that is because my husband worked for the highway department. He made stripes, but the stripe on the highway is 10 feet long. I've had people say 18 inches. And I'm like,
Because it's made so that when we're driving so fast we can see
right.
it, because otherwise if it was 3 feet long you would just see a little dot basically.
But we're not familiar with the outdoors like we think we are, right? I mean, um, so I always question myself, um, on what when I say, "Oh, he was 50 feet away," you better check that because how big was that tree?
Right.
This forest in the Pacific Northwest is not the forest in North Texas,
Yeah.
so or Oklahoma.
Just the
So,
size of the trees alone, I mean, the Pacific Northwest, let alone the redwoods. I mean, that's
yeah,
anything standing next to a redwood, but even those Douglas firs that you can find in those areas, those things are massive. And I mean, I'll never
right,
forget when I learned about that highway thing. I was driving up, going camping with a buddy of mine in northern Maine, and he told me that fact. And we're in the middle of nowhere. This is one of the most remote parts of the East Coast. And I'm like, okay, I pulled over and I laid right next to the line in the road just to see, because I couldn't believe it. And yeah,
yeah.
it's just one of those things that you just don't know, but you kind of take it for granted, right?
Exactly. And so my husband and I came to the agreement that a surveyor like Mark Marcel, who's
Who's the
an
man? Absolute
amazing
man.
dude, um, would probably be your best expert to go because they're in the environment, they're out there, and that's the thing. I'm always trying to find someone that's the expert that can teach me and
Some
help
other
me.
field, right? Or some
Mhm.
other discipline. I mean, something like
Yes,
surveying would be extremely useful for something like that, as you mentioned.
exactly.
They're
Exactly.
not looking at it from a Bigfoot perspective. They're
Nope.
looking at it for, okay, well, I need to know this because the property owners or whatever, they rely on this data being accurate. It has much more of an impact in whatever the case may be. So yeah, there's some people in the comments have some interesting thing to say. Mothman 46 says she's 100% spot on. Most folks fudge up distance and
Yep.
size. And Gerald Lang says, I agree. I hear interviews where they've seen something about 200 yards away and seen eyes or muscle features. Come on, that's 2 football fields, not open area like football field is. No credibility. I hear those stories too, and
No
it's just so hard to believe. I mean, and
Yeah.
that's not a dig at witnesses or anything. And I think people, we
Right.
over time we add details maybe that weren't there to encounters because we've convinced ourselves of what it was or whatnot. And that's, I think, a different phenomenon we have to look kind of tango with.
Right. Well, and that's my point, I think, is we can't, always trust ourselves, right? I mean, because and especially when we've already had some kind of encounter or we believe,
Yeah.
right? Because our brain is already, I tell people all the time, I'm like, you're looking for Bigfoot 24/7, whether you know it or not,
Bigfoot on the brain.
So, yeah, because it's in your brain, and when you're driving down the highway, your mind is just focusing on what is or isn't Bigfoot. And so for me, so at this point of my journey, I don't listen to podcasts. I don't watch social media. I don't watch, well, I do watch Finding Bigfoot because I just think it's the original, and I kind of have a soft spot
We
there
got so
for it.
many people that are into it, the subject now into it. Yeah, I agree. That's what got me originally back into it after a long period of not really being interested in
Right.
Bigfoot.
And so we can't trust ourselves really at this point. I mean, if you've had an encounter, I believe your first encounter. Anything after that, it's not that I don't believe you, but I think your mind is wanting to make things that, unless you have like 3 or 4 pieces of quote unquote, not evidence, but say you got audio, a sighting, a footprint,
Right.
then we can talk. I mean, and I'm not poo-pooing anybody. It's
No,
just
absolutely.
we've got so much on our plate, right?
We've got to scrutinize some of this stuff because the
Today.
wild claims, and I mean, once it gets, it's already off the rails, the whole topic. I mean,
Mhm.
when it gets to, I think especially the most common probably that I see, and I don't know what, you said you don't watch social media as much, but the stick structure stuff I think is
Oh, let's talk
off
about
the
it.
rails. Yeah, let's talk about it.
Let's
Awesome.
talk about it. So, for me, so do you know who Kip Morrell is?
I do. Kip, yeah, he's a friend. I met him at Bluff Creek, and he was
Okay.
in our documentary over the summer at Bluff Creek.
Okay, perfect. So, you know that his wife, Miriam, is a nature journalist. She nature journals, right? She draws what she sees and then records all the metadata of fires and wildlife and flora and fauna. It's an amazing thing. It's a citizen science that our forefathers did. All the
Right.
discoveries of the flora and fauna were done through nature journaling. That's how it all started. It's back to
People
the
like
basics.
Audubon, all sorts of those
Yes.
guys in the past. Yeah.
Yes. I mean, Lewis and Clark, that's what they
Right.
did. That's what his wife does and is incredible at. And I got interested and talked to her. And so I started nature journaling tree structures. And it leads you down rabbit holes because you're starting to ask yourself very specific questions. What does it remind me of?
Yeah.
Why is it here? And so you get down these rabbit holes of what are these tree structures made of? What tree? How long does it take for this tree to, or this type of wood to degrade? When was
Yeah.
the last flood? When you're really starting to focus more on what is going on in the forest than what you're seeing in the forest. Like you're seeing past the trees at this point. And I learned this from Miriam. And I think she's super amazing. And once again, this is citizen science at its best. It's getting back to the basics where
Right.
we need to be. Because, Sasquatch has been here forever, right? So when have you ever heard, when people tell me or come up to me at a conference, say I'm speaking in a conference, they come up and they show me a picture of a tree structure and they're like, hey, what do you think of this structure? I'm like, who told you Sasquatch made structures? And they're like,
Somebody
what
on
are you talking
YouTube.
about? Like, nobody's ever recorded a Bigfoot building a tree structure.
Yeah.
And to back that up, my good friend Jonathan Brown says, I've never heard of a Native American talking about tree structures. I mean, have we? If we're going to listen to any people that talk about Sasquatch in history, it would be the Native Americans, right? They don't talk about tree structures. So
Right.
why are we influencing people? And where did that come from? That tree structures are built by Sasquatch. Maybe they are. I don't know.
Right. That's the thing. I mean, and this is a good point. Lisa puts in the comments, tree structures equals survivalist structures. And I think that is
Mhm.
part of it. Absolutely. And I've been shown pictures
It's a lot of
before.
things.
Yeah, I've been shown pictures before of people saying, well, I found this in the woods in a state forest. And it's in an area where I know that people can sign up for a survivalist course, naturalist course that will teach you and go how to make debris shelters or lean-tos. And these are the remnants of ones that they built maybe 4 years ago that are,
Right.
and that's what people, and because somebody on YouTube or somewhere said this is a Bigfoot structure, I think maybe that's also part of the pattern recognition that we as humans want, right? And that goes into the pareidolia stuff where we want to see faces. We look at the classic, the red circles, and there's a Bigfoot there, there's one there. You want to see something that's face-like or like a human face.
Right.
The anthropomorphizing of everything. We're looking for things that
Good
remind us.
word.
Yeah, we would like to remind ourselves of stuff that's like us, and I think that plays a part of it. And that rumor just sort of took off. I know of one sighting that I've heard of, and I've spoke to this guy personally, where he saw what he didn't even describe as a Bigfoot. It was some kind of, he said he wasn't sure what it was, but it was like a tall, hairy man-like creature that was sitting inside of a structure that was built out of stacked rocks with a hemlock roof, and that was here in New Hampshire. That happened in the 1970s. One of my favorite encounters. I talk about it a lot because I got to interview the guy a few years ago. That's the only one I know of, and that is not a structure I've ever heard reported before. With the things that people talk about, and so much of it is snow load, so much of it is us maybe wanting to see, like, I found perfect A's out in the woods out of sticks. A for Alex, right? Is that me just wanting to interpret that using what humans are? So
Right.
I respect kind of the take you have on the whole structure thing, because it's frustrating when I've experienced the same thing. People come up and say, well, I found these in my yard and we get these all the time. And it's like, well, if you get them all the time, I mean, I don't know.
Right.
It's like, if this thing is supposed to be as elusive as it is, I don't really know if they're leaving signs all over the place. Does that make sense? Maybe they are. I mean, but I'm leaning towards probably not as much, not to the degree it's reported, because that's like everywhere. Right. If you just Google stick structures, Bigfoot stick structures, there's 1.5 million results. It's crazy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, so I started journaling them because I wanted, to feel like.
I was just reading one of the comments. Lisa said, "Crazy Todd in Canada started the tree structure thing." I think.
Crazy Todd.
Todd Standing. Yes.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
That would make sense. I don't know if he was the first, but he probably got it more popularized, which,
probably
unscrupulous as he is. So.
And like I said, I don't.
Well, here's also So Kevin he's in the same part of Canada that Todd Standing's in Alberta. He says tree structures became part of the Bigfoot dogma about 10, 20 years ago. Before that, you never heard about them. That's a great point.
That's why I say you never hear about Native Americans talking about them. It started when the internet started. I mean, basically with Bigfoot. I always say Bigfoot went insane when the internet came on board.
Oh, I know a guy who got out of Bigfoot research because of the internet. He said the BS factor went too high, and this was somebody who researched way before that. As Pat from Squatch Talk, what's going on? He says we need other trace evidence with structures or actual observation. Yeah, I mean, have you seen a Bigfoot making an X structure, or as Tate says, there's stick structures high up in trees? I see them all the time. Yeah, I mean, so if they're high up in trees, obviously. Does that mean a Bigfoot is up there climbing and building it? Not necessarily. And I think this is Tristan, I believe, says, I think structures in the woods are natural, human and Sasquatch, a combination. You just can't say they're done by one thing. And I mean, could be, that there's multiple factors going on there. You've got winter damage. You've got us trying to see things, survivalists, people building stuff. I mean, people underestimate what humans can do too. I think so many of these things, it's just people messing around or having fun. I used to do that when I did naturalism. We used to build these debris shelters that once they deteriorate, there's not a lot left. It might look like a little teepee kind of thing that, somebody in the woods, the untrained eye, like, whoa, I heard about a guy on YouTube talking about that. It's Bigfoot. It's there. I think there's a lot going on there, but it's just, as we mentioned, it's automatically been attributed to Sasquatch for whatever reason, for however long.
Right. I mean, the human imprint and footprint on the Sasquatch subject has been really strong in the last 10 years. So that's why I don't listen to podcasts and it's no, how do I put it? I don't want to upset anybody. It's just I don't want to be influenced by anyone. I want to be influenced by wildlife behavior in general. I mean, my classroom is when I go out for 4 months, or I go do my tracking work and behavior, wildlife behavior work, and or I talk to people outside of the Bigfoot community because they don't have that in the brain.
Crucial.
And it upsets people, but
well,
they don't pay my bills, so I don't care.
Well, as you mentioned, I mean, even I read in your bio, your quote was, you're trying to look at it from a non-emotionally attached
Yes.
way, and people get, when they have an encounter that happens to them or something they perceive as an encounter, they get emotionally attached to
Very
what has
much.
happened. I mean, that's happened to me, and I have things that happen, but you cannot 100%, unless you saw it. But even then, you could have been at fault. But people just get emotionally attached, and that's normal. It's a human trait. It's
Absolutely.
doesn't not just Bigfoot. It's every other thing that happens. So it's
It,
not like that's a human error. It's just ingrained in us.
oh yeah, and that's I tried. That was the other reason why I tried to be alone a lot, because, and don't get me wrong, people are like, "Oh, you're so brave." I'm like, "Not really." I mean, it can be scary. I mean, I'm an older woman. I'm pretty fit, but I'm not as fit as, let's say, a 30-year-old. But and I carry firearms and I'm well protected, but I'm chasing a monster, right? I mean, and there's, at my last expedition at our camp, one of the guys or two of the guys actually turned a mountain lion coming towards a camp,
Yeah.
like literally like 100 yards from our camp on the road. So lots of things can happen, but I don't want to be influenced by those around me, because I feel like when we're in bigger groups,
Oh,
and
did you
even
hear
though,
that?
did
Oh
you
yeah, I
hear
did.
that? Did
Yeah.
you hear
Whoa.
that?
Yes. Right. It
Yeah.
happens. Yeah.
Yeah. And then when I drive away, it's like, oh, okay, let's break that all down. But I love my friends. I mean, don't get me wrong. I love them and I trust them. But to be perfectly honest with you, I'm shrinking that group every year. It gets smaller and smaller. Not that they're not my friends. I'm just saying, we may be friends, but I don't want a Bigfoot with you. And it's nothing personal. It's just I spend way too much time and money to engage in that.
Right.
Um, because I've been with people who have seen things and experienced things that I'm not experiencing at the exact same time.
Yeah. I notice that a lot with people hearing stuff. You'll hear something
Hmm.
and somebody else, well, oh, I didn't hear that. Did you hear something moved right there? No,
Yeah.
I didn't. I mean, what are the chances that something big is moving there that you both didn't just hear it? It's tricky. So I know what you mean. I mean, it's in one hand, it's if you are with a group and something pretty crazy happens and you're able to either film it or get audio of something, at least you have somebody else that kind of can corroborate, right?
Right.
But at the same time, when you are alone, and yeah, I think that's a good thing. Everyone should go out to the woods alone every once in a while. Just you learn new things about yourself, spending time
Well,
out alone as
and you
well.
and you
It's
can
you're not, like you said, you're not influenced by those other sides. But please continue.
and you're not. So for me, I'm at my best when I'm alone because of a couple things. Um, I convince myself whatever is happening is not a danger or not Bigfoot. Like I'm rationalizing what's going on that I'm hearing.
Right.
So, because when you're frightened, that can be very dangerous. And I can't afford to be frightened. I don't want to worry my family and I don't want to make mistakes. So I need to rationalize what is really going on and go through that process. Um and I'm also getting so much more done. Like
Yeah.
I'm not talking to everybody. I'm not like processing what they're talking about and what we're going to do and all this. I'm only worried about what I'm going to do. And every day I get up, I pull down my thermals, I pull down all my audio, I download it, I go through it, I replenish my batteries. I have this system because I'm
Sure.
not interrupted, because I'm extremely ADD, I guess, whatever you want to call it. I get preoccupied with whatever's going on over here. And so, because I want to be really good at what I do. I mean, this isn't, spending my husband's money on a joyride for 4 months away from him to have a good time pretending I'm a Bigfooter.
Right.
That's really selfish and unkind, in my opinion. I want to be really good at what I do so that possibly I come up with some kind of new technique, new idea, or new evidence. I think, and I don't want to be that person that's always finding some new evidence. I don't think, I think that's unfair. I think Sasquatch is too unique and too special that he
Right.
ain't hanging out at your house for years upon years, and I think it's irresponsible. Um, I think it's misinformation. I think it minimalizes the really good encounters, where
Right.
I think it takes away from those people. And so for me, I want to be nothing more than, I don't even like being called a researcher because I don't think I've earned that job, earned that title, I guess. And because we've had many people before us that spent many, many, many years and a lot of money and a lot of time and never found anything.
Right.
And I think Sasquatch deserves better than that, better
And
than what we're doing today.
that is awesome. I think a lot of times people, when they're in a group, they're with fellow folks that think like them, right? Like-minded. It becomes a social thing, and there's nothing
Yeah.
wrong with that. But
No.
at the end of the day, when it comes to productivity, I think it's absolutely on the money with that, and I respect you for that view. And as Brian, he hikes a lot. He solo hikes with his dog Chewy up here in New England. He says, "Quieter the better, in my opinion." Or it's easier to be quiet when searching around, or you hike with someone or a couple other people and it's loud. It's like elephants. That's what happens is you're talking, you're doing this. We're social animals. It's really interesting. Just put yourself in the woods on a hiking trail and try to hide yourself as other people go by and listen to how loud that is. Go from that forest silence to a group of people walking by. It's incredibly loud. I mean, it's unbelievable. But absolutely respect you for going out there alone. A lot of people won't do it. It's too scary for most people
It's
to
a
be alone.
little scary.
It's nerve-wracking. It is. The first time you have to spend a night out in the woods alone or go on
Mhm.
a solo trip alone, it's I don't prefer doing it that way. I've done them, but not nearly as much as you do. I much prefer being with a few folks or people that I trust, and it can't be easy. But when it comes to those times out alone in the field, has there been any moments where non Bigfoot related, obviously, threats or dangers that were really kind
Mhm.
of stood out to you? Because that's most of what you probably have to worry about, that unless you
Yeah,
believe
human
in the
danger.
missing 411 stuff where you're going to get kidnapped by Bigfoot.
Well, you know what? I mean, I've never, let's see. I've had a couple of things that happened where, well, I had one where some people tried to come into our camp, but I wasn't alone.
Right.
Um, and I pulled my firearm, and they left. Um, it was meth heads, in the middle of the night, sneaking in with empty backpacks, telling me they were going to pull their game cams. I'm like at 3 in the morning. I mean, I heard them on the road. Uh, they parked, like they shut their truck off on the road, and I could hear click, click with the doors. I mean, and it was way up on the road. When it's a clear, cool night, how far away you can hear. And I guess being alone and being raised by a law enforcement family, and then my husband's really alert. They're always telling me be aware of your surroundings, and so I'm always listening.
Right.
And that probably has to do with Sasquatch stuff too, and so I mean, I don't like to talk about that too much because I don't want people to think I'm a nut bag, because I've
No,
pulled a
but I
gun on
mean, it's
somebody.
you
But
have to be aware when you're out alone, especially, but even with other groups, that people are usually the biggest threat. I mean,
yeah,
unfortunately, most animals, especially black bears, I mean, they're really not that big of a threat unless
no,
you're extremely belligerent with your food placement, that sort of stuff. Even mountain lions, I mean, nine more than 9 times out of 10, they're probably going to want to stay clear of you.
I don't worry too much about wildlife in general that are in the lower, 48.
Yeah, Alaska's a
Other
completely
than,
different story.
yeah, that's a different story. Um, I think my biggest fear with wildlife would be wolves,
Yeah, there's a lot of
because they're tactical.
stories.
They
Yeah,
work
right.
in a group and they do kill for fun. I mean, it is a fact. And but my one of my goals is to on with a tracking group, so because I'm a certified tracker, I keep in contact with those people. And so one of the things that they offer in Montana, I think it's Montana, is a 2-week trip to track a pack of wolves, just to follow them through Montana.
That must be
So
incredible.
I know, right?
Coming across
Um,
those kills and all the other stuff that they do.
yes. And I don't know that people understand that when I talk about tracking, or anybody does, it has to do with the whole plethora of wildlife behavior, like how they kill and
Yeah,
what kills what and how it kills it. I mean, you should be able to look at a feather from a bird that was killed and know who killed it by the teeth marks in the feather. You know, it, it- those are the things you're learning. And so your perception of determining how to look at the forest and all the things going on there is way more detailed. Like, you start to see things you never saw before, which you passed every
right.
day, that may be in your backyard. I mean, it's like the angle of a cut of a blade of grass. Who cut that? Was that a lagomorph, or was that an ungulate? Because of who has teeth and who doesn't, and just amazing stuff that anybody can do. Anybody can be a tracker, a certified tracker. You don't
Yeah,
have to know how to read or write to be a certified tracker, because all this came from our forefathers and those in Africa who don't read and write. That's
right.
how tribal track.
Uneducated people. I mean, think about
Yes.
200 years ago, how many, uh, compared to the world population now, how closely most people in the world lived to
Yes.
the land. Whether it was you lived on a homestead, while the West was being settled, and you didn't really have a choice. You kind of had to know, well, is this a grizzly that's coming in, or what are we dealing with here? It's like that was life or death. Now we have the luxury of being able to learn that as an additional skill, and you can just go on YouTube and learn basics about tracking, or get
Yes.
yourself a Peterson field guide and just start comparing different tracks. I mean, it's obviously taking a course is great, but there's a lot you can do just on your own before you maybe get to that level. And I think that
Well,
it's just upping your game ultimately in terms
upping
of
your
being
game and making
aware.
yourself some kind of expert. If you really love audio, make somebody in the wilderness audio field outside of Bigfooting your friend.
Right.
I mean, the perfect person to me that loves to share information is Dr. Meldrum. You know, in his field, I mean, he loves talking about what he does and what he
Yeah.
thinks and his expertise. A lot of people in their expertise love talking about what they do. You don't have to run out and say, I'm a Bigfooter and I want to learn what is it Bigfoot. Just go and reach out to people. All they can do is say no, right?
Right.
And but there, like, so we have things like master naturalist certifications. We have tracking certifications. We've got things in all states because citizen science needs conservationists. They need people like us who are not paid government employees, because they can't afford paid government employees, to collect data
Yeah.
and help with the data collection process. But they need you to be certified and trained. And what you do is you go to you Google it. Google is a thing. Everybody uses it. But what people are not doing, I mean, I don't want to, I don't want to impress upon people that they're not doing the right thing. It's
Right.
just, think of beyond Bigfoot. If you're interested in audio, really look into wilderness audio and look into what it would take to be how can I get my audio of different types of species on the Cornell, I think it's the Cornell website, and there's people that are out there that want to help you. The
Yeah.
CitSci website, which is a citizen science website, will help you with any paperwork. They'll help you do studies, and it's all free. All of it. We just got to do it. We're
Right.
looking in this tiny box. We need to look in this box. We need to look in that box. We need to expand. Like I said, I love my friends, but my friends aren't the experts. If I've got audio, I'm going to go to an audio expert. I love my friends. I'm going to get their opinion, but I'm going to go
Sure.
beyond that. I'm going to go to someone that's actually certified in wildlife behavior to get their opinion, not just the Bigfooters. Broaden your
What's a
horizon.
confirmation bias then? I mean, if you're just
Yes.
asking people within your own community, it's easy to get somebody who's going to agree with you. Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yes. And
I think even further than that, I mean, I think about there's a lot of people in Sasquatch and in general. I mean, you look at the hunting community, right? It's a big area. There's a lot of people that if you go hunting, you at least have or at least some do. I mean, not all, everyone have some sort of basis in how to track an animal or find stuff out. Maybe just take that as a starting point and expand from there and, use that as like a jumping off point. I don't know if that's something that, people that are into that sort of stuff, because not everyone's into hunting. Not everyone, wants to do animal tracking. People want to do just looking at audio. That's fine. I mean, learn more about audio,
Well, like I have a friend. I say she's a friend. She's an acquaintance who is she's a specialist, is a certified tracker. She's a specialist, like she's way up there. But she's also an expert in game camera traps. Like if you want to, let's say, capture otters on your game camera, she knows the behavior and she knows where to capture those photos of otter. Do you see what I'm saying? So those are the kind of people I want to visit with. And I want to teach me how to better my game in Bigfooting. I don't have to tell them I'm doing Bigfooting.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You never know. I mean, most people today probably are okay with it, but not all of them are. I mean, I'm on a lot of Facebook pages that are tracking pages. They don't want to hear about Bigfoot. But what isn't Bigfoot helps me way more than what is. I don't know what is Bigfoot. I don't know anything about Bigfoot, but I know enough about other things
You
that
can weed out things that might
weed
be
it out.
mistaken for Bigfoot, or
Bigfoot
your
last.
your mind might automatically jump, well, that was probably a Bigfoot.
Right. I mean, I can tell you the difference between black bear and grizzly bear tracks by measurement and how the toes are, from the digits to the pad. I mean, I can talk all about that. Can we talk about what the digits do with the Bigfoot? Maybe Dr. Meldrum can, but I can't.
Right. I mean, you'd have to talk to somebody like that who specializes in hominid foot morphology, right? Not everyone is going to be able to articulate that, or talk about the mid-tarsal break or whatever kind of is attributed to something that could be a double bear print, right? A double step.
A direct register, which I can talk about that. I can talk about it all day long. But is it a big, after that? What's after that? Human Bigfoot or anomalies or whatever, natural occurrences. Then I need to reach out to other people that actually are experts in those fields. And I'm not.
And I think that's good. And a lot of historical pieces of, alleged Bigfoot audio or other evidence has sort of fallen by the wayside simply because somebody who was diligent enough was able to say, well, that is a coyote scream. And I mean, Chris Spencer will go on and on, about the coyote screams, obviously, male coyotes making their vocals that I think are very, often confused with possible Bigfoot sounds, the Puyallup screamer, right? That's one of them, all these examples. But again, that's somebody just wanting to find out, hey, is it possible for a known animal to make this kind of noise? And recognizing that you don't know all the sounds that known animals make, because they do not make the same sounds all the time. Just because you heard 10 sounds from a moose or something on YouTube, they can make other noises, or mountain lions. They can
Oh,
make noises nobody would ever imagine. So
right.
and I think it's a good idea to say Bigfoot last. Absolutely.
Well, the day that I had the encounter, the first one, we were hearing, I mean, there's so much to that whole event, and I leave a lot of it out because there's just not enough time to talk about it.
Right.
But we were hearing this call near the lake that was like a scream. We thought it was a bird, but it was like, wow, wow. Finally, Nathaniel and Kirk went to investigate. I followed. It was a coyote. It was a coyote that had an elk, a female elk. She was laying in the grass. I mean, I don't know if she was hurt or not, but he was screaming at, someone. Like, it felt like he was saying, hey, I have something here. Somebody come help. Coyotes or whatever. And, but the call, we didn't recognize it as a coyote call. It was like, ah, ah, I can't mimic it perfectly, but it was something I had never heard. So yeah, you're exactly right.
I really like that concept of stepping your game up. I think we just need to do that in general.
Absolutely.
So much more of that is needed. And I know there's been a little bit of a push for that lately. Hopefully 2022 is the year where that happens. And you try to get the subject taken more seriously, because all that, the stick structure stuff, the madness, whether it's on YouTube or Facebook, or the reposting of the things that were debunked 10 years ago, as always happens, gets tiresome. People don't really take it seriously. We need more absolute sober-minded people that are willing to even debunk their own alleged evidence, let alone what others have presented. Will we get more of that? I sure hope so. And I love that you're doing that, and we definitely need more of that. But what I did want to ask you about was, you mentioned in our messages about the Alba Vernix. So that is something that I think is definitely relatively new. I mean, in terms of the Bigfoot world, right? I've had Doug Hychek, talking about it in the past, and that's something that's come up. Dermal ridges have been talked about a lot in the past, and there's obviously been back and forth about some of the legitimacy of that and the casting issues. But Alba Vernix stuff is pretty interesting. We've all heard stories of handprints or fingerprints on vehicles or windows. Now, what is your kind of experience with the Alba Vernix stuff? And if you could just really quickly go over what Alba Vernix is.
Sure. So I was involved with a face and handprint, which was collected by my buddy Michael Waldy here in Texas, who I'm working with on a thermal project right now. So anyway, and Craig Woolheater, a couple other people were involved, but Craig Woolheater.
It was around the time of the Texas Bigfoot conference, right? I think I had Craig on right after that, and he told a little bit. That was a while ago, but really interesting. But go right ahead. I mean,
so anyway, Craig contacts a couple guys, one of them being Michael, about a face print in East Texas on somebody's door. And I wasn't involved with any of that. I just was involved with the DNA collection because that's kind of one of my that's really my thing. That's how I got into the Olympic project. So anyway, at the conference, I get a call from Cliff, and he's like, "Hey, I need you to bring all your DNA stuff." I'm like, "Okay." I don't really know what's going on. I know a little bit, but I don't want to ask a lot of questions because it's not my investigation. And so Michael Waldy had pulled this door in which, if you want, anybody can message Michael Waldy and he'll tell you everything about it. And Craig Woolheater will too. And it's a fascinating story. But anyway, Michael convinces this family that find this face print, which is basically the nose and everything, forehead, the nose, and the upper lip, on this door. At the top of it, I think it was 6'3", 6'7". I don't remember. It didn't matter to me. I'm just there to collect the evidence. So I bring all my DNA stuff. I didn't have any carbon to pick up the prints though. I'm interested in like hair and those things. I'd never thought about collecting actual face print or fingerprint substance as DNA. And but anyway, I create this kit and I use actual eyeshadow pigment because I used to be in cosmetics, and it's up to human standards. It's sterile, and it's carbon, and so it works perfectly. Anyway, we collect these swabs for Doug Highcheck. After that, that's how I got to know him. And through the process, I'm trying to make it really short. Through this process, I'm talking to Doug and he's like, Shelly, we need to figure out a name for this. We can't call this white waxy stuff, And so I go on the internet. I'm like, okay, I can name it. And Alba meaning white and Vernix meaning, waxy substance that is on newborn babies. And that's how all I did is come up with a name, and the kit. So now we have the Alba Vernix Latent kit, which you can collect all and every kind of DNA and the face and handprints or any kind of print you want. It's all in those kits. I've sold out of the kits actually. Eventually I've been working on a video on how to do that and what you need. But to be perfectly honest with you, the Bigfoot community is just really jerkish. And I know they're just going to tear me apart no matter how well I do it. So,
yeah, it's going to be either way. So it's
yeah.
almost like best to disregard, what a lot of people unfortunately
I
say.
guess
Just stick with those you trust and look
well, I
outward.
went to the medical field and the forensic field to come up with this kit. Like, but I know I'll never please everybody, but it's just
There's no way to do it. Everyone knows best, right? Everyone's smarter than everyone else online, and they'll say stuff that they would never say to your face online because they're anonymous.
I've met people that were really rude online, and I've met them in person, and they're the nicest people, and I'm like, okay, whatever. So,
Right.
but yeah, that's the Alba Vernix. I mean, in a little tiny itty bitty package, but all the credit really goes to Michael Waldy, Doug Highcheck. I just came up with the name and the kit, but it's a group effort, and of course Cliff Brackman, who I assisted in that collection, and I think we successfully collected whatever. Once Doug gets the funding and is able to test everything, we're going to find out what is or isn't, or what it is or isn't. I don't have any expectations. I don't care. I just am about better tools and better thinking.
Yeah.
I think Sasquatch deserves that.
No, and that's amazing. And I've had Doug on talking about that before, and I've talked to him as well behind the scenes about that sort of stuff. And Craig, it's funny because you mentioned, because Craig was on the show right after that happened. I think it was November or December of 2020. So it would have been shortly after that took place. That was really interesting. And you hear those stories so often of people seeing, I've had people here in New Hampshire that have had alleged encounters that have gotten weird handprints on their hand, on their cars, and people don't know what to do with it. You just sort of take a picture or something like that. And
one thing I will tell people, I think that we haven't thought about, that if you really think, let's say you go into an area and you think you're having some kind of Sasquatch activity, take some alcohol, wipe those windows down before you go to bed. Just anything that's there already doesn't mean anything, right? So, and of course we know that dust can collect even with people walking around it, right? Walking around after you've shut all your doors or the wind comes up. I think that is a lot of what we're seeing. But if you really think that you're going to have something, you need to wipe down your windows before you lay down. That's
a good tip.
And that would be crucial when you turn in any kind of collection and say, actually, I wiped down my windows with alcohol before I laid down and look what I got. I mean, right? I mean, everything is about metadata. Like, you shouldn't be taking pictures. You should be taking video of everything you do, because you can
Yeah.
pull pictures out of it, right?
Right.
It's just
Document it.
it's just like tracking. When people send me a picture of a track, I'm like, why are you sending me one picture of one track? I need to see 760,
Why
like
is
a
there always just
3D.
one track, right?
I need a standard size measurement, like even a dollar bill. A dollar bill is a dollar bill. A 20 is a 20. They're all the
It's
same.
universal,
It's
exactly. And
universal.
then people have it. It's easier to carry a dollar bill in the
Right.
woods, and you probably have one on you in the woods as
Right.
compared to maybe a ruler. That's something you purposely put in there. But
Exactly. And let me give this one tip, which is kind of totally off, but it worked really well. I had and I get people at conferences that'll come up with pictures, of a washed out track. It's just, I can't make here or there of it. And what you need to do, if you're taking pictures of any kind of tracks, and you should be practicing with every kind of track, just so that you are really good at it. Because if you get something that's of importance, you don't want to screw it up, right? It's like
right.
casting. You should be casting everything all the time and practice, practice, practice. But anyway, when you take a picture, let's say, of something you feel is of importance as a track, if you don't have, so the best time of day is when you have a shadow from either side, like from one side or the other, or shadow with your body over the tracks. You need dimension, and to get dimension, you need a shadow. You can use your body. If you can't do that, as soon as you take that picture, go in and start messing with your editing, with your brightness, and all of those little guys,
Yeah.
where you just go up and down, you get some
Exposure,
darkness,
contrast, yeah.
all that. So I had a gentleman who came up and showed me this track at the conference, and I was like, I don't even see what you're talking about, but take it and do this. He comes back 2 hours later and was like, you were so right. So it was a horse print. You could see the frog and everything. There was also a coyote print in it, and it was going
Okay.
the other direction than he even thought, because it was a slide. So that is the one thing anybody, before you start sending off pictures to Dr. Meldrum or whoever, start messing with your contrast and brightness, and I'm going to tell you, it's going to come out. But if you can get shadow in your track or video, which is even better, I think 80% of what people think is Sasquatch will be discovered as known occurrences. Sorry.
Yeah, and we need that, because otherwise, all this stuff is just becoming accepted as part of the evidence to a lot of people, especially the layperson that's maybe just seeing it on a YouTube video, and it's, oh wow, okay, there we go. So this is what I need to look for. So they're out there looking for a horse track that has a coyote print in it. How is that useful? How is that useful to any of us?
It was beautiful. He was so impressed, and I was too. I was like,
that's an awesome. I mean, it's good. Some people probably get defensive, but it's awesome that he's open-minded to do that.
Well, and it wasn't me telling him it wasn't Bigfoot. That's the whole point.
Right. It was just look into it further.
Right. You need to look further. You need to determine what this is. And I couldn't tell him because I couldn't see anything. It was just so, blasted out with bright light. And I just said next time. But he went home and worked on it, and he came back, and he was so excited and so impressed. And I was too. It was great. It was an awesome learning experience for both of us.
That is awesome. Now, there was a comment earlier that I did want a couple of comments and a question I want to read. This one was from Lisa Johnson, who asked or writes, Shelly, I have a master's in forensic science and 11 years in processing crime scenes as a major case response team leader. I can talk about the kit with you. That is really cool.
Okay. That's awesome.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
See, I love when, you have people from different backgrounds that are, able to kind of help each other out or even collaborate. I mean, you never know. It's
Right.
that's what's great about it.
The thing about my kits is everything's up to human standards. I only order from the medical field, and they are sterile, sterile above sanitary. And then the most important thing I tell people, because we all believe that we should be super sanitary, super sterile, right? People get all crazy if you watch a crime show, they don't put on masks. They don't, they pick stuff up with
Because they're trying to show their lovely faces, they don't want
I
to be
guess. I don't know, but my father's in law enforcement, and he
Right.
wouldn't tell me to do all this, but I overdo it with my kids. But one thing I think
you don't want to contaminate it, make human get in there, right?
They're already contaminated. It's already contaminated. Once something hits the ground or anywhere, it's already contaminated by other animals or other humans. Think about it, I mean, but I want people to feel like they're doing their best, right? Like they're video. But the other thing I suggest to people is don't put on one pair of gloves and don't put on two pair of gloves. I put 3 pair of gloves, like over the glove. So if you feel like, sort of like double dipping, like if you touch something and you just take that outer layer off, now you're sanitary again.
There you go.
You don't have to go and
precaution. You see what I'm saying? You don't have to mess with other stuff and risk more contamination. Yeah.
Right. There's a whole process, and I would love to talk to her because she could probably help me. On my video, I've filmed the whole thing like 2 times, paid a couple people to edit, and they don't know what I want. So it's okay though.
But no, I think it's really important to just the tips you're bringing up, because let's say you're out there and you do come across something like this and you have no idea what to do with it. And I've heard the stories of plenty of people that have come across either a good track or something like that. They just didn't have the proper tools they needed or knew what they're doing, or they screwed something up. It's happened to all of us. I mean, we've all had issues with audio, whatever the case may be, but just having that, at least practicing a few times, maybe other things, it can't do any harm. I mean, you're just sharpening your own toolbox.
So one of the things, one of the things I like to do is practice my DNA collection through hair. And you can do a number of things but you have to be really careful when bird's nest. If you find a bird's nest, certain birds collect hair to line their nest. So you can literally kind of break open a bird's nest inside of a white plastic trash bag, like pull it apart, throw it in the trash bag, shake the bag, create static electricity, cut the bag down the sides, open it up, and all the hair will stick to it.
Oh, that's a really good tip.
You can do that. Another thing, if you want to pull out like a white piece of paper or napkin and you feel like just to find hair, it doesn't matter what kind of hair. Like I look for bear hair specifically because I think it's really cool. I love bear anything. But if you want to look for specific types of hair or any hair at all, take a white piece of paper and walk up and down a barbed wire fence and put that piece of paper under the barbs, and boom, contrast. The hair will show up. Yeah. Say cool. You see a game trail, carry a white piece of paper and, put it along that trail, along the branches that are covering that trail or down low. My husband always says, why do y'all put cameras up high? You should put them in 18 inches, or on the ground, because everything, little is moving through tunnels under the ground. And if anything walks by, you're going to capture it. Just think outside the box a little
That
bit.
is awesome. I'm totally implementing the paper and the bag technique on our next trip out there for sure. If we, just to, like you said, just it's so cool finding
Oh,
other stuff out there. I mean, we're planning this whole Florida thing soon for
and
twenty-two,
Florida will be great for you. That
and
I've done some work in Florida, and
it's a
it's
crazy
very
environment,
similar to Texas, and
right?
you're gonna love working in Florida.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm, as I mentioned earlier, talking about mountain lions, I'm really interested in the whole
Oh
Florida
yeah.
panther thing. So that for me is, I don't want to say I'm more excited than Bigfoot for,
No,
Bigfoot
but
kind of
it's
stuff, but
amazing.
the things you learn along the way, that's one of my favorite parts of it. We get a lot of moose up here in my area. So for me, whenever I come across moose sign or anything moose related, it is so cool. It's the biggest
Yep.
reward you can get out there learning about all these other sorts of things. And
I,
it's just, you're not just out there for Bigfoot, you're out there for everything else. And you said you
right.
shouldn't just be out there for Bigfoot because
Mm-mm.
You're thinking Bigfoot all the time.
Right. And you can't learn what's not Bigfoot if you're not learning about everything else, right? Like, how can you discern that? So, grizzly bears are known to kill elk and skin them, basically pull all the hide off and kind of roll it up and tuck it away. How many people do you know that will walk upon that and think it was Bigfoot?
A food cache or something like that.
Well, they're just pushing it away. It's not, it's just, it's kind of like, oh, how do I put it? It's kind of like game cats who shear off. They shear off the fur on ungulates or any game, like big game, like their incisors will cut the fur. They literally have to cut it because they don't like fur in their mouth. So to
Right.
tear into the flesh, they cut the fur off first. I mean, those kind of things are super interesting because the morphology of the body of wildlife determines how they behave, right? The way their body is built is why they behave the way they do.
Right.
So if you know as much as you can know, which you'll never know at all,
No,
it's a
there's no way.
learning process from the day you're born till the day you die. Because things change with environment, and why do some, animals do this in one region and don't do it in another? You
Yeah,
know,
that's a good point.
coyotes are a
The
perfect.
same species, what
Yes, so
there's
coyotes are a
regional
perfect example.
adaptations.
Exactly. So it's a constant learning curve for you and me, and the animals are constantly changing. I mean, I'd say constantly, but little differences can mean a lot. So that is so interesting and so cool. But I believe that that also applies to Sasquatch. So why is it that Sasquatch in Texas, Oklahoma looks a specific way, acts a specific way, let's say,
Right.
and then in the Pacific Northwest is completely different. I mean, their tracks look different to me. I mean, they're very boxy and bulky up there, whereas here the heel narrows and they're lanky and they're sparse and the hair's longer. But up there, the hair is shorter and more denser and they're bulkier.
Yeah.
I mean, so all those things do apply. Once your eye and your mind's eye starts to work that way, your muscle memory starts to look and focus and work that way, then you can apply it to your Bigfoot stuff.
Awesome. Absolutely.
I
No
think
doubt
so.
about it. No, it is. And it's just, you're not only you're pushing yourself to just learn more about the natural world that if, these things they're living in this environment that we are extremely disconnected from for the most part. Most humans, as we talked about earlier, not living on the land. There's only like 14-15% of the US population is involved in agriculture. And even that
Mhm.
is separate, from nature in farming and that sort of stuff. So the more you can learn about just the environment, it can help you weed out all those other things. And
Mhm.
you just have so much fun along the way. And I absolutely
It's
applaud you
amazing.
for your approach because a lot of people, they, whether or not they're, have things with TV or whatever it is that they want to push a certain narrative that everything is Bigfoot. And, and I totally get it, especially at conferences. A lot of people will come and tell you their stories and all this
Yeah.
sort of stuff. And it gets tough because it's not only is overwhelming at once, there's obviously a lot of things that are mistaken identities, and we have to be able to confront that and say, well,
And you
maybe
don't want
genuine.
to.
You don't want to crap on them, right?
Yeah, no. I mean, and unfortunately, my face tells the story. Like you can tell, I'm like, oh Lord, and I feel bad because I'm not trying to be anything but sincere and honest and sweet. I want to
Right.
be nice, but I do expect more. I'm like, what more you got? I want three things.
Yeah.
I want a visual, I want audio, I want a footprint, I want some DNA. I mean, what more can you give me? And usually it's just like this blurry picture of a tree structure, or a blurry picture of what they call a shadow in the woods of Bigfoot and a tree structure. And I'm
Yeah.
like,
We need a
here's
higher
a
standard.
book I want you to read about wildlife behavior and tracking. And you know what is so amazing is I have had more young women read the books, and I've had people go and become master naturalists, which that's hard to get into those certifications. I can't even get into them. They're so popular here in Texas. And got their master naturalist certification. I've had autistic kids who have memorized wildlife behavior books like the
That's
Bible,
incredible.
like, and
Yeah.
come to me and say, Miss Shelly, I love foxes, so I learned everything I can. I'm just like,
That is
that's
so
what we
cool.
need.
Right.
Those are the people who are going to make a difference, not just in Sasquatch research, but conservation altogether.
Yeah. And that's something we, of course, need. And, we're talking about these things living in these environments, and we want to protect them and the
Yes.
environment. I'm not talking about Sasquatch specifically, which we don't know if we really need to protect them or not. I mean, I think that's a conversation we need to have at some point when
Right.
we have more data to work with. But the environment, at a minimum, is the ones that you want to protect. I mean, not just for Sasquatch, but other things living in that area. Because if it's all
Exactly.
part
I
of an
mean,
ecosystem, Sasquatch has to be a part of
exactly.
that.
Yes. I mean, I'm really getting into right now looking into natural species, of just grasses and what they mean to our areas. And I know that when you start pulling certain species out of an area, certain animals start to disappear. And that could be, just a crazy little berry or grass. I mean, I know nothing about it, but I want to. And that's the thing about Sasquatch. So why is he doing what he's doing in these areas? Why are
Right.
these clusters going on? And why are these clusters going on every, let's say, 4 to 6 years in this one specific area where you're getting, let's say, sightings and calls? What is that? People talk about food. Well, maybe, but what if it's mating? And
Right.
so why are they mating there? And if they are mating there, what's bringing them there to mate? Is it the resources? Those are the things I'm interested in.
Yeah. And that's just part. It's all part of it. It has to all be connected.
It all has to be connected. And that was the big thing for me on the reservation this year for the Grays Harbor big thermal footage.
Right.
I spent 2 weeks in that spot. I camped in that exact spot for 2 weeks. I'm lucky because you have to be invited. You can't just
Right.
go
Yeah.
there. And it's a small reservation. There's only 500 people that live on that reservation. But what I was seeing and what I was hearing from the people that had this encounter, John and Sarah Brown, over that period of time, and there was a lot that people don't know that never got released. And it's not my story to tell. All I can tell
Sure.
you is what I experienced when I was there. Because when I hear people say, it's super scotchy, what do you mean? East Texas versus, the Pacific Northwest, they're not the same, but you hear it's super scotchy. What are you talking about? Well, this was that one place where the resources. So we got an open meadow in their backyard that's got 2 rivers going through it, the Chehalis and Snake River. They've got these giant apple trees. that are producing giant apple. I'm eating the apples, berry bushes, elk, deer. I mean, it wasn't missing anything. And then years and years and years of people feeding them. And the stories weren't crazy. Like
Right.
they were just like, yeah, two were seen walking through here and this happened over here. It was just, and there's not a lot of I want to say a lot of hunting pressure on that
Right.
area. Um and you have generation after generation of people, and then salmon in October, the end of October, just so I don't know. I mean, if there's that's a whole other story, and Jonathan Brown is and Sarah are excellent witnesses. It had some really substantial things happen to them, including that thermal footage. And I know people talk about a cow, that
Heard
cow,
that
and I'm
too.
like,
Yeah.
I know cows. Cows don't give a crap
And I'm
unless they
gonna
got
I'm
a
gonna link that video. You sent me the pair breakdown one, which we've
yes.
referenced on this show a ton of times. It's
I
not the
love
first
cow.
time I've linked it in the video in the description because that's obviously talking about the Browns. I think it's just important
It's
to check it
super
out.
important because there are things that had happened that day that were never put out. That wasn't super important in general. Like, I'll tell you one that stuck in my mind because I know cows. Um, so they had the cows, on that place, free range, right? Someone
Yep.
had brought in the cows and the tribe let them have them there. But that day that he got that Jonathan's brother got the thermal, um, the rancher had come and picked up all the heifers and steers, which are the yearling calves. They're a year
Yep.
old or older, and took them away. So all the mama cows were bawling all day long for their calves, their heifers and steers. So for me, in wildlife behavior, when you hear distress calls from, a meal, what what could that bring in? I mean, if you want to bring in a coyote or a cougar or a bobcat, what do? You play distress calls.
Yeah. Baby animal
Hmm.
sounds does work pretty well.
And if you've ever heard cows bawling for their calves, they're just what? I mean, they're just going off and off and off and off. I mean, I would be curious, what the heck's going on over there? So I don't know. It just an amazing sight. One of the most important places I think I've ever been. In all the places I've been, and I've been to them all. I've been very fortunate to have been to them all. And it's up there. So
That's
I'll
awesome.
be going back for sure. And I just think, I mean, what's going on, if anything at all now, I don't know, but what happened then, I think is super important.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. It's interesting. It's one of those things that it's hard to say, but once you look at those other factors, I think I don't know. I mean, I can't say one way or another what it was, but it's definitely an interesting case. And I
Well, I
know
mean,
just some of those
it's
details.
really hard to justify anything if you've not been there, right? I mean, it's only fair to give that person, when they've got that kind of, you know, interaction or quote unquote circumstantial evidence, I guess, in thermal, you need to be there. I mean, if you talk to people and that was another thing, is Kurt Brandenburg was doing and still does investigation with the Browns and Shane Corson and the Olympic Project. I mean, I
Right.
had been fangirling these people for years, and I couldn't get to meet them because they were so standoffish, because they had been, people didn't treat them very well,
You
you
get
know?
burned in this subject pretty
Yeah.
frequently. It's happened to a lot of us.
Yeah.
Yeah. You become,
But
yeah, it's like a self-defense thing. You don't want to
and
get,
I don't blame them one bit.
absolutely, yeah, for sure.
And they had to earn my trust. And finally, I got to go there last year and spend that. And I knew them before, a couple years. I'd met Jonathan and spent a whole night with him and on an expedition. And then he invited me, him and Sarah did, and I'm so grateful. And but once I got there, it just really was one of those experiences where, not that anything really happened. We had one night in the 2 weeks that something did happen, but it wasn't even about that. It was
Yeah.
just, when you say this place is Scotchy, that's the epitome of it. It just was, other than my encounter location in, let's say, Bluff Creek or whatever.
Yeah,
But
and that's the thing. I think getting on boots on the ground, sort of anywhere, if where there's some sort of famous video or something, it's just important because you can analyze something as much as you want online or through people that
yes.
have been there, and I think you should do that. But if you're able to get to a place, like for me, I mean, one of the big ones was going to Bluff Creek and going to the Patterson Gimel film site. That changed my perspective about that footage. Now,
Didn't it? I mean,
I still can't say obviously 100% because that's just the way I am. I'm stubborn like that. But I think it's just that alone, made me think, well, hey, why did these guys not just, if it's all, a hoax, like so many claim, you could have filmed this outside of Willow Creek, that would have been
it's
to the
hard
same
place
effect.
to get to.
It really is. And it's just one of those things that I wouldn't have realized that. I mean, I had some
Mhm.
clue of it, but it's just not the same as once you actually are boots
Nope.
on the ground. So
And then also, where they have marked that Roger was standing versus Patty, so close. Did you, I mean,
yes, yeah. I mean, we were there with the Bluff Creek Project guys, and they were showing us
mhm,
we slept probably 10 feet from where Patty walked because that area is that one that still has no
uh-huh,
really growth in it. So it's and the next day Rowdy Kelly
yeah,
and Robert Leiterman, they just put out the book on it, but they showed us exactly the whole trajectory, and it's just fascinating
yeah,
to listen to people who have gone to that extent of learning an area and knowing about all the other stuff, and being able to retrace the steps of this, the world's most famous Bigfoot footage and one of the most famous films in the world, most
mhm,
analyzed probably after the JFK assassination footage. So
exactly.
whether or not it's real, whether or not you think it's real, it still has a significance. And this is just to a broader kind of society, people that don't believe in Bigfoot. It's still an interesting part of the cultural aspect of
Mhm.
Bigfoot, whether we like
It
it or
brought
not.
the
It's
subject to the forefront. you
yeah,
know
right.
there's something, and I believe that Sasquatch Patty is a living, breathing entity. I mean, I don't bring any other fringed ideas into my Sasquatch research, because why would I mean, it doesn't need to be that. It's so simple, it's brilliant. you know we try to make it something more than it is sometimes, in my mind,
Yeah,
because we can't fill in those blanks, right? Well, that's just because we're not there yet, right? I mean, look at UFOs. Do I believe in them? I should. I don't know. I don't think about them much. I don't poo-poo the idea,
sure.
but why are we not proving them? Because we're not there yet. Science isn't there yet.
Right.
I mean, it's a waiting game, and I think people are super impatient, and that's why they fill in the blanks with these things like tree structures or whatever. I mean, like I said.
Ivan Mark syndrome, maybe, as Thomas Steenberg says. It's like you want to believe so bad that you start that. I
Mhm,
think that's a real thing where people, maybe they've had a legitimate experience and they start going into hoaxing
mhm.
because they're so desperate to, I don't know, relive that magic or stay relevant. And especially now with this whole YouTube and social media landscape, you want to get more of that notoriety, and the more stuff that happens,
Well,
the more
yeah.
you get attention on you. And that's something that people do in every other facet of being online and social media and that sort of stuff. The more outrageous something is, the more you get outrage clicks now. People will
Yeah.
talk about the Bluff Creek massacre theory just because they know it's going to drive anger their way, and that going to
Yeah.
drive their revenue up, right? So
Well, that person is a content creator.
right.
That's not me. And that's not, I mean, in my sense of Sasquatch, I don't want to be recognized as a content creator. And like I said, I don't know that I deserve the title of researcher. I'm a wilderness enthusiast, and I'm just
Sure.
trying to find the truth. And
I'll change the title to that of the show if you'd like.
that's fine. I mean, I don't, I mean, I don't really, like, I don't, the only thing that matters to me is that my family thinks I did it right,
And
because I
yeah,
take away from them.
you're not trying to please all these other people. I mean, essentially,
No,
but when
not
it comes to
really.
like you mentioned content, and I consider myself a content creator. I mean, we're creating content here, but I think there's a responsible way to do it.
But
And
yes,
most people, the
yes.
easier way is to not do it responsibly and just go off the rails, go into the woo, and just start talking about everything else. Because hey, UFOs are popular. If we put a UFO angle in,
Mm-hmm.
man, that's going to get a lot more of the UFO clicks,
Mm-hmm.
right? I think there's a responsible way to do it, and one of the most rewarding things for me is when people tell me, they had no idea how much beautiful wilderness there was in Oregon or New Hampshire, or wherever it may be, and it inspires them to go out hiking or go enjoy nature, whatever they want to do, whether they want to go painting for gold or kayaking or whatever
Yeah.
hobby they might get into. Like, they're just getting out there. We need more
Right.
connections to the outdoors now, probably more than ever, especially as we get into this sort of everything is always connected tech sort of social media world.
Well,
It's pretty scary. I mean,
people, when I speak, at the last conference I spoke at in Honobia, I I really get kind of frustrated with people because I'm not out to prove uh the hoaxers are hoaxers. I don't care. I could care less. That is
there's
your
people that
American
do
right.
that, and that's good for them. Like, I think we do need people that, like Steve Coles and others, who will out hoaxers. Like, that
I
is an
kn-
important role, but not everyone has to fill that role.
no, and I really don't care because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. I mean, it doesn't. We don't have proof yet of anything, right? Proof is going to be proof. But I guess I upset a bunch of people because I said if you because I don't like it when people say, oh, they're just doing it for the money. Do you know how much freaking Sasquatch research costs? Like, I just put my truck
Yeah,
in the
I
shop
know.
for a whole new suspension system. I'm gearing up to go to Alaska for a month. And it's important to me. And no, I don't make a dime on anything, but if I wanted to, how dare anybody tell me, "Oh, they're
Yeah,
just
yeah.
doing it for,
I
the
hear that all
money."
the time, and I mean, that's the thing is, like, somebody creates films and these sorts of things. Like, it's not for
Well,
free. And I mentioned, I think there's an ethical way to do it. There's plenty of unscrupulous folks out there, but
we're
it's
all exploiting Bigfoot. If you're telling your
right.
story, you're
Oh yeah,
exploiting it.
totally.
If you're writing books, you're exploiting him. If you're on a podcast like I am, you're exploiting him. I mean, come on. I mean, and people don't like it when I say that. And I'm like, but that's the truth. So how do you justify saying someone who writes a book is okay versus someone who I don't know, if you're selling t-shirts, you're exploiting it. And, if you don't agree with their path on how they're doing their Bigfoot in, adventure, whatever it may be, then they're exploiting it. No, we all are.
Yeah,
But it's still a good thing because at the end of the day, his name is out there, the Great North American Sasquatch. And when he is proven to be the Great North American Sasquatch, so many people have heard about him. And so
yeah.
many people are in love with the Great North American
Oh
Sasquatch.
yeah. I would
He
say, like,
will
good
be
thing there's no
protected.
copyright on Sasquatch, because
That's right.
we'd all be paying royalties to Disney or whoever owns, Bigfoot or Sasquatch. And I think even more importantly, the term Sasquatch. I mean, that is
Yeah.
a First Nations term. I mean, it's an anglicized one that was taken
Right.
from Saskets, but that essentially was their
Colonized it.
yeah, and it was their mythology before it was,
Right.
what it is now. And now you have cultures around the world that have embraced it. So it's really become a universal thing for
It has.
humanity. Yeti or Otang of Africa. I mean, Yowie, you name it, there is some sort of a representation of that. So it's beyond that. But specific terms like Sasquatch, that's a First Nations term, and I think, like you said, the topic overall needs more. Sasquatch deserves better, because all this
Mm-hmm.
drama, we talk online, and we're all guilty of it, and we're doing it right now. We're just talking about Bigfoot. We're doing this sort of
I mean,
stuff.
and it's great. It's fine. I have
But
no
Bigfoot's out
problem with
there.
it.
Bigfoot is out there,
He's out
not in
there.
here. And so many people are so obsessed with what's here and not getting out there. And, that's not one of those digs that you don't know what you're talking about because you don't spend any
Right.
time in the woods. There's tons of people who are desktop researchers that I think do great stuff. They're specializing in
Oh,
certain
me
things.
too.
That's what they're doing. And
We need
not
them.
everyone can get in the field and doesn't have
That's
to.
right. I admire people that are a plethora of knowledge that I don't have. I can only be good at one or two things. I don't want to be, you can be, what is it, the jack of all trades,
The
or
master of none. Yeah.
the master of none. Right. And so I try to focus myself on improving what I'm doing by educating myself, getting in the field and learning from the wilderness and learning from true experts. I appreciate everybody and I enjoy the camaraderie and
Yeah.
because I mean, I don't talk about Bigfoot to outsiders. I mean, I don't, that's not my first conversation or my last a lot,
Right.
unless
Right.
someone like my kids are like, do you know what she does for a living? Like I don't get paid for it, but and then it becomes a conversation, but you'll never hear me walking in somewhere and saying, hey, I'm a Bigfooter and da 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 da. I don't do that at all. But I think we just need to do better, as a whole. And
Yeah.
I think we're on a good path though.
I think moving forward, there's a lot of good people that are getting involved, and there's this. I don't want to call it a battle, but there's definitely divisions, and there's certain more entertainment related stuff, and
And that's
um,
okay.
that's fine. But some of it is I think harmful misinformation in general about other topics,
Yeah,
and
but you should be educating yourself enough to find them,
that's
like
awesome. Like when you can recognize that, well, hey, that story was and this is one of those things, that story was debunked 10 years ago, and it's so somebody new
mhm,
got in the subject and they are posting about it because they're really amazed by it. Well, maybe
yeah.
they'll get to the point where they can also discern and say, well, okay,
And they
because we've
will.
all fallen for that stuff. I've fallen for it. We've all done it. I mean, there's no
Yeah.
one who's immune to. You really want to believe, oh wow, this is probably legit, and then it turns out to not be legit.
Oh
But
yeah. I mean, in the beginning, I was like, "Whoa." Well, there were certain ones I was like, "Are y'all really believing that person?" I don't know. Y'all are mad because he hoaxed you not once but twice. You
that's
know?
yeah, that's just I think the sociopathic stuff, and that's like a people
Yeah.
analysis, personality analysis, whether it's narcissists or sociopaths. Like we were just saying, we were talking about Tom Biscardi yesterday with Steve Coles, and
I've met
that is
him.
just such an interesting, just in terms of like human psychology, just a case to look at. Somebody that's clearly
Yeah.
not interested in Bigfoot, but just uses it as a Ponzi scheme method to
Mhm.
make money and kind of rip people off and be a jerk.
Yeah,
So
but when you meet him in person, he's so over the top. If you don't
it's kind
realize
of what Steve was
how
saying. Yeah.
crazy, I mean, such a bullshitter he is, that's on you.
Well, it's the con man kind of thing, but so
It
many
very
people
much
fall
a
for
con man.
cons. So many people fall for it in so many other aspects of the world.
Yeah.
Bigfoot is just one
Yeah.
microcosm of that. But this is just a comment I wanted to read when we were talking about the equipment and all that stuff. This
Mhm.
is Jeff from Pine Island Research. So I was on his show while it was going live here because we pre-recorded.
Mhm.
He does a lot of research with Doug Highcheck. Really nice guy up in Minnesota. He says my research expenses this summer so far total about $26K. Money recouped zero.
Me
That's
too.
right.
We
Right.
bought this year. So my partner and I invested in 9 thermals.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
That is cool.
Yeah. So, and that's a whole other show. I mean, Michael Waldy and I, so we are able to set up his truck with 2 thermal, like, FLIR drone, thermal drones on top of the truck with fold down screens. And then we have 2 more thermals out the windows. And then we have a thermal drone we can launch. And then we also set up a boat to do the same thing with extensions. So we can, like in Texas, we have these like say the Red River, if you you got 30-foot walls, so
Yeah.
we can extend the thermals above us, and then I have 2 more thermals and 2 more iPads. So at all times I got 4 thermals going, and then we can launch the drone. And I got a drone, but we only have 1 thermal drone, and then my husband has another brand new thermal. Yeah, so we invested way too much money. But our purpose and goal on that project is to try to get one entity on 3 different thermals at the exact same time from 3 different angles moving.
And that's, you're not only, you can't argue, well, it was one device that was having maybe
Right.
the image is a malfunction, right? If you get it on 3, what are the chances that 3 devices malfunction at the same time?
So when we
Corroboration.
spot something with the rooftop thermals, then I pull out, or he does, depending on what side we're on. And we've got the iPads that we set up where, say, I've got my XP50. I can zoom in I think they pick up human detection at 2,000 yards. And I can zoom in, but he can control it all off the iPad as we're recording it. So I don't have to worry about taking the picture, recording, or color, or anything. All I'm worried about is focus. But we've also got the one on top that's already focused at a different angle. And then we can launch. I've got Michael down to about 45 seconds from launching the drone in, and he can fly under a canopy.
Wow.
And we're getting permits for flying and license and trying to do everything as legal as possible. That's
awesome.
a whole other show about the legalities of being a Sasquatcher traveling cross country.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff. And when it comes to drones too. Yeah, and on that note, I do just want to take a couple questions as we're kind of winding down, but where'd that question go? Pat from Squatch Talk asks, what thermal drone exactly? I know he's into drones, so I'm sure that's I'm into drones too.
Yeah, so. It's the newest one. It's the Zoom Enterprise. Is that right?
Zoom Enterprise.
You'd have to ask Michael, and he can tell you.
I think he's in the chat.
The newest one they have.
I will pop it up if he's still in the chat. Yeah, that's interesting. And then there was a question earlier I did want to read. I thought it was pretty interesting. If I can find it.
I feel bad because I can't think of. I know it's called the Enterprise. It's the DJI Enterprise.
Okay, yeah, I don't know. Jeff, the Enterprise 2, he was asking.
Mm-hmm.
Enterprise 2. Okay, right on. Yeah, that is awesome. Yeah, DJI, they're kind of top of the line right now.
We have a DJI store here in Dallas, so we get to actually go to the store. Yeah.
That's cool. Now, here's a question earlier from Kaiju Ninja who asks, does Shelly think women have a better chance of a Bigfoot encounter? Does she think men might be intimidating for the Sasquatch?
I don't think it hurts to be a woman. I think, we're smaller in stature, and our voices are not as robust, I guess. And I try to take advantage of that. I don't know, but I mean, it doesn't hurt. I mean, it's just like I play ukulele in the woods because I think wood instruments are soft and soothing. So, I mean, that's a great question. Like when I had my encounter with Nathaniel, he was a smaller guy, and we put all the bigger guys, the 3 other guys who were older and bigger and more robust, they went and got in their tents and let Nathaniel and I sit in the dark and laugh and, yell out because we were smaller. So a good question. I mean, I think I think children, not that I would condone bringing children to a Sasquatch thing. I think it's kind of dangerous because I don't think you should use your child as bait. So, but you hear about like the Browns at their home, they have 3 small girls. So, I would not be surprised if that didn't.
Yeah, there's an interest there. I mean, and there's stories, kids, they go camping, they spend time in the wilderness with their parents or with others, Boy Scout groups. A lot of the historical accounts, when it comes to the Mogollon Monster in Arizona, that was named by those Boy Scouts that were terrorized by this thing up there in the mountains in Arizona, which is interesting. So here's one more question, and this one is from Splash Bordeaux, who says, if you get good thermal footage, who will be the final authority to validate, and how do you think it will help with discovery or recognition if science won't accept anything less than a body?
If you get good thermal footage, who will be the final authority to validate? Well, I think I would be going to a lot of experts in thermal. My father's part of, well, he's retired state law enforcement. So we would be contacting people in his field that probably would have I mean, the military
I was going
works
to
with a
say
lot of thermal.
something like Border Patrol, maybe. I know they use a lot of thermal technology. Or would
Border
that be
Patrol, yeah, but yeah, I mean,
possibly?
so I'm working on some thermal things that I can't really talk about, but
Yeah.
I'm learning. So I'm learning a lot about what thermal does and why it does it. I mean, so let's look at things like waves on water actually create friction, right? So they show up on thermal. Fish show up as a hot signature versus a cold signature on thermal.
Right.
So I'm trying to get really good at it. And I'm seeking out some specialists in the thermal field because I've made some discoveries I have not heard of and I can't find anything about. That I'm working on trying to create a 360 thermal camera.
Nice.
Yeah. So I think probably the military would be a good place to talk to those people, and universities.
The military's got all the good stuff that we won't know
Right.
about for a while. They might even have that already.
But as far as proof, I don't think that they'll consider that proof, but I would love to have one entity on 3 cameras and just throw it at the Bigfoot world and say, here you go, fight over it. Tell me what it is.
We could do a whole show, I'm sure, just about the thermal stuff. At some point, maybe in the future, after you have some more field time with the thermal setup, I'd love to have you back on to talk about, any kind of developments or anything like that. That'd be awesome.
I've got thermals going into trees, I mean, there's all kinds of stuff. But another authority I would talk to is the medical field, because they're using thermal imagery to actually, see cancer in the body.
Yeah,
There's
right.
a program, I believe, that they're creating, I think through Princeton, where they're able to watch the blood flow through thermal. So think about that. If we could send a thermal image, a thermal video that we captured of an entity, and you could literally see the blood flow, the veins pumping in the body. I mean, that's not proof, but it'd be
right.
interesting.
I mean, that's something that'd be extremely hard to fake.
Yeah. Well, and I've always said, if you want to fake thermal, use black, because that is primarily, and I can send you some pictures I did of screech owls, because I go out and therm all kinds of stuff, and we're constantly experimenting. But blackout is for silhouette. And what it does is it gives the hunter the advantage of knowing the behavior of the animal he's looking at 1,000 yards. So if you're looking at a dog versus coyote, here in Texas, we hunt coyotes at night, or people do, or hogs. How do you know it's a dog versus a coyote? Because you know the behavior. If you put it on black hot, you're going to see a better silhouette, and you're going to focus more on the behavior.
Okay. So you don't recommend using black hot overall?
No.
Or are you saying, yeah, okay.
White hot is going to give you the most detail of variation in a silhouette.
That's noted, because when I admittedly, I'm a fan of black hot when I've really I only really have most experience with like TK Scouts and some of the other kind of mid-tier FLIRs. So I'll probably adapt. We're trying some other different thermals. I've got like an AGM one that we're gonna try.
Well, if you want any advice on thermals,
Oh,
please call
absolutely.
me. I have a thermal dealer.
No, it's super awesome. I will
Think of
absolutely.
it this way. Don't think of thermal as Bigfoot hunting. Think of it as hog hunting.
Yep.
Because the hog hunting community, there are people out there because that is a major money maker.
Yeah,
And
of
that's
course.
where the thermal community focuses.
Right.
Okay. So better equipment because because you're hunting. So you've got to discern animal behavior at 1,000 yards. So you don't kill somebody or somebody's dog
No,
or
of
their
course.
their horse or whatever. So you're going to get better equipment for a better price.
Sure.
So
That's
look
yeah.
at Pulsar, but also look at Hogster.
Hogster.
Mm-hmm.
And the hunting community overall, I think, is a good place for other, things as well. I mean,
Sure.
just to look and use that hunting experience for folks that have it.
Right. Well, I had to justify all my thermals so they could go from my hog hunting rifle into my Bigfoot,
Hey,
work.
you're getting more use out of it than just
Yeah.
from one thing. That's the way it should be.
Well, it helps with the hubby.
There you go. Awesome. Well, Shelly, it's been so great. I mean, I think one of the comments was, Kevin was saying 2.5 hours. This is like a Rogan podcast.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. We usually, I say, an hour and a half to 2, but it always ends up going over for the most part, especially when it's an engaging conversation. And I've definitely really enjoyed talking with you. Would love to have you back on at some point in the future. And
sure.
The chat, you guys have been, I did see when you guys were cracking a lot of jokes, they were trying to make me laugh at one point. And they were like, there was a lot of pretty crazy comments. You guys, I was trying to keep a straight face. Okay. I have a good poker face.
I can't read anything because I'm blind as a bat. So
it's all going so fast, but no, the great comments and questions as always, guys, in the chat, and everyone else, that's tuning in after the fact. This is definitely important conversations. And I think, Shelly, you brought a perspective that we need more of, that just sort of not everything's Bigfoot. And I know there's been a lot of people lately talking about that, and absolutely, credit for folks saying that, because we're inundated with too much BS, I think, especially with the online stuff. So
sure.
now, Shelly, is there anywhere?
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, absolutely. And the last thing, is there anywhere, people can keep in touch or find out about any developments or anything like that, or maybe the DNA kit stuff where they can obtain sort of stuff like that?
I'll post on my Facebook occasionally. I'm steering away from Facebook. But you can message me on Facebook at Shelly Covington-Montana. I mean, I'm easy. I do check those. And I'm on Instagram at CryptoChick2. And I'm also on TikTok at CryptoChick.
Gotta have some fun with it, right?
I love it. I love TikTok because I don't know anybody. And I can make new little 15-second videos about, my brand new titanium wood stove, my Pomali wood stove that cost me way too much money, but it's awesome because I can hike with it, or I can heat everybody up in the tent with it.
Sure. And I mean, people are into gear. Nothing wrong with that either. Gear. Yeah, same. So
big time.
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, again, thank you so much, Shelly. Thanks to everyone in the chat. As always, for folks watching, be sure to watch previous episodes. And next week, we will be joined by Emily Fleur of the Forest Fleur. Be awesome to talk with Emily as well about her perspective in the topic. And I know she's been out in the PNW recently as well. So lots of fun to be having these kind of conversations. And, they're lighthearted, they're casual. We have a good time, but we try to talk about important topics as well. So thanks again to everybody, and everyone have a great rest of your week. And we'll see you guys next week on Sasquatch Out of the Shadows Live.
Thanks again. Thanks, everybody. Bye.